about, and we start this conversation off acknowledging the discomfort of the subject, recognizing none of us want to talk about it. But I'm here to put a good spin on it today, because once we talk about this, we just know we have a plan, we have peace of mind, your children have peace of mind, and my advice to everybody is go on living your life and live it well. But I'm here today as the co-owner of Cox and Graziano Funeral Home. We're located at 134 Hamilton Avenue, the newly refurbished facility that many of you have come to know over the few years that we've been here. My father, Vincent, is in the back. Many of you recognize him. He's the licensed director there. And he's also on hand to answer a lot of your questions regarding pre-planning as well, so I encourage you to speak to him. I want to start by talking about the term life event. What is a life event? When we think of life events, we think of good things traditionally. We think of a wedding. So we have time to plan that, usually a year or so, perhaps sometimes more, and sometimes you can do it again. And, I can admit that sometimes you don't get it right on the first try. We think of, what else? We think of a baby. We think of having a baby. We have 9 months to plan that. So we plan. We pick out names. We pick out furniture. We pick out godparents. We think of, children now get enrolled in preschool, I think, when they're in the womb. So we do a lot of planning. If you have grandchildren, you know that. But what about death? Death is a life event. It is a one-time life event. And it is a time where the world, but for a moment, should stop, not often does, but should stop, and everyone should pause and reflect on a life that was lived. But it's your life. How do you want it reflected upon? How do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be honored? You can't assume that your children or your loved ones have these answers. And this is not time for assumption. And unlike the two happy occasions that I just mentioned, the wedding and the baby, where there is time to plan, when someone has passed away, we're dealing with 24, 48-hour windows to make irreversible decisions. You can't wake up in 6 months and say, I wish I did it that way. So the need and the importance of putting a plan down on paper is perhaps more crucial here than in any other life event. Your children, like I say, and I'm going to be a total hypocrite here because I don't speak about this, nor do I think about this. I work with my father, who can't even tell me where the family cemetery plot is, because it's just not something that you want to think of. So the difficulty comes here in how to have the conversation with your children, because there's going to be a bit of a bumping heads. And admittedly, this is how the radio program began. I was asked to give this talk at a senior center in Westchester because the seniors wanted to talk about this and their children did not. And I don't want to talk about this either, because I'd rather talk about the parties and the weddings and the babies and the good stuff. But I learned to recognize the value in having these conversations. And my father will vouch for it, sitting there, that there's a difference between sitting in an arrangement room with the funeral director saying, what would mom have wanted, versus, oh, this is what dad wanted. When you eliminate the guesswork, you can focus more on your grief. You can focus more on the emotions that you're feeling at the time. Because 24, 48-hour windows are not long times to make decisions, but when you're laboring under the stress of sadness and grief, you're not thinking clearly. You're not going to remember key information that your funeral director will ask you. What is mom's maiden name? Was dad a member of the service? Where are his discharge papers? We'd like to give him military honors. So there are so many benefits to having these plans in place, and I'll talk to you a bit about the decision making that you're able to make, and also how to start this difficult dialogue with your children and loved ones, so that once it's done, it's done. And as I always say, you put it in a drawer, you go out to lunch or dinner, take a trip, you go on living your life. So as I said, when it comes to the life event of death, we often freeze. But there's so much planning in there that should be done. And as I mentioned before, this is not a time for your kids to assume what you want. Let's think about a couple of questions. Do you know where you want your services handled? Do you know who you want to entrust your care to? It makes a difference. You're not comparing apples to apples when you compare funeral homes, and I'll get to that in a second. Do you want a wake or a visitation? So often I hear, the family dynamic has changed, and funerals reflect a culture, they reflect a society. And as our children start to move away, my dad doesn't know that as both kids work with him, he can't get rid of us. But as some of us, we move away, you tend to lose sight of the ties that your parents have to the community. And why a wake would be important to you. Because you've lived your life here, your footprint is here, you raised your kids here, you went to the school systems, you went to church services Sunday, you had coffee at the diner every morning. Your footprint is here. And the community rightfully wants a chance to say goodbye. But unless you express that, would it be assumed? If your children are not living here, or your caregivers or loved ones are not living here, how will they know the value that you place on that unless it is communicated? Here's a very big one. Do you want to be buried or cremated? Who wants to think about it? I understand. However, if you don't express it, who would ever assume the latter? Who would ever assume it? So unless your wishes are and that might be a very big cause for contention amongst family members. You might want it, and your children might say, absolutely not. Or on the flip side, you might want to find a burial plot, and your loved ones might not see the significance. What do you do there? Your wishes are not known unless they are communicated. Do you want a church service or a funeral mass? Do you have a clergy that you have an affinity for, that you want to, perhaps they've relocated, but you've kept in touch and you want them notified? Are there certain songs that were meaningful to you that you want remembered during the time of a wake or during a funeral? Certain flowers that you like, certain poems or prayers? There is, believe it or not, a detailed event planning aspect to this. And sitting down with a trusted professional who will take the time to hear those wishes and needs and kind of jog your brain a little bit and get your wheels turning as to what you want, that makes all the difference. Funerals are not cookie cutter. It's not that someone passes away, you call up, and there's a step-by-step procedure. Not with us, not at Cox Graziano. Funerals are as unique as a fingerprint. Every life that lived was unique. And what's good for me might not be good for you, but everyone has a right to be remembered in the way that best suits them. So now that we know some of the things that we need to plan or that we are able to plan, how do we start the dialogue? How do we start talking to our loved ones? My first advice is to acknowledge the discomfort of the conversation and put it right on the table right away. Be in a comfortable setting, your living room, a cup of coffee, dinner, a glass of wine. That loosens any conversation up, arguably. Coffee might make you more tense. But you sit with your children and you force the conversation to be had. And you start by saying, I know you don't want to talk about this. I understand, but we have to. And then you explain some of the reasons that I just outlined as to what would happen if you don't talk about it. My next piece of advice is to communicate the why behind your wishes. If you want to be cremated, perhaps there's a reason for it, that you don't want to be tied to a parcel of land. You don't want your children to feel the need to come back to visit in that parcel of land should they be relocated out of town. Communicate the why. On the flip side, if you want to be buried, or if you want to be in a mausoleum, or if you want to be in the ground, communicate the why. Understanding why helps put people on the same level and helps bridge the gap of misunderstanding and miscommunication. So we've acknowledged that we don't want to talk about this, but we acknowledge that we have to, and we explain why it is we want what we want. And be receptive to the other side as well. If your children or loved ones are not understanding you, or if there's pushback, understand the position as well. The meeting of the minds, and that this is advice for anything, even when you're doing legal planning with Donna or healthcare planning with Linda, it's important for everybody to understand where the person planning is coming from. There's often a reason behind our wishes or a reason behind our intentions. And being open and honest in this dialogue and letting the reasons be communicated will only help everybody find better solutions for you. So there are a few administrative matters regarding funeral planning that I want to make you aware of as well and share a little anecdote with you. Does anybody know what an agent letter is? Can I get a show of hands? I know we all know living wills, healthcare proxies, and trusts. Do we know what an agent letter is? Agent, A-G-E-N-T. Well, that makes me help. Not you, Tina. Oh, not you two either. Well, nice to know some people are listening. This is a very great thing. So, as of October 1st of 2005, Connecticut citizens have the right to declare their own wishes for disposition of their own person. That means your wishes can be expressly put on a piece of paper, not your will. We're not talking about a will here. When I speak of agent letter, there's a very limited specific purpose to this legal document, and that is solely for your funeral. And everything else we throw back at Linda, so you get the bulk of this here tonight. What the agent letter does is allows you not only to say what you want, but says who will carry it out for you. Funeral directors are bound by a legal hierarchy of who can come and speak to them and sign off on arrangements. Whether a person's being cremated, there is an extra layer of paperwork involved in that, or who can control authorizing us to go to a hospital, to bring someone back to our care, to plan the funeral. Not just anyone can come in to speak to us. Your friends can't automatically come. We're bound by a legal hierarchy that usually goes as follows. Your spouse, first and foremost, that is your primary legal next of kin. If your spouse should pass, it goes to your adult children. Regardless of how many children you have, there is no difference in legal standing between oldest, youngest, regardless of how many. They all share equal legal standing when it comes to all legal matters, but specifically here, planning your funeral. In the absence of children, it'll kick back to your siblings. In the absence of siblings, nieces and nephews, you go to a lineage and a bloodline, and that is a legal hierarchy. However, what happens if there are no tangible immediate relatives in your situation? What happens if there are children, but they're thousands of miles away? They're out of state, they're across the country, they're out of the country. What happens if there are 3 children and 4 different opinions? Which resonates, I'm sure, with many. And everyone's well-intentioned. We keep that in mind. Everyone believes that they're acting in mom or dad's best interest. So they believe that they know best. But what happens there? How do your wishes get communicated? So the agent letter, which we're happy to provide copies of for those who might want to take a look, and you can make an appointment and come in, and my father is very good at explaining that. The agent letter allows you to bypass the legal hierarchy and pick a person that you trust to carry out these wishes. It can be your friend. It can be your neighbor. It can be your case manager. It can be your attorney. It's a trusted person that you know will carry out these instructions. You can have 5 children, and you can opt to designate an agent that is not one of them. This is an option available to many as circumstances change. Again, the family unit, the nuclear family unit, for some of us, we're lucky if it is intact, but for many, such is not the case. So it's important when you're thinking of your planning and thinking of your healthcare planning and legal planning, you have to go that next uncomfortable step to plan who will control your final wishes. And once again, it's peace of mind. It's the knowledge of knowing what you want is carried out, not what someone thought you wanted or assumed you wanted. These are irreversible decisions. I encourage everyone to have this dialogue with the ones you love or the ones that are closest to you. So as Donna mentioned, part of pre-planning, part of elder law planning, Linda touched on those two, is pre-planning for funerals. Tina's in the back, my father is here as well, and they can get into much more of the specifics here. I won't bore you with all the details, but I will touch on it in brief. So now that you've made the decision to pre-arrange, 2 reasons to do it. One is just your peace of mind. You can come to the funeral home, you can sit down, you can go over your options, your selections. You don't have to pre-fund. You can choose to pre-fund in a revocable pre-need account, a revocable trust. Revocable means it can be canceled at any time. It can be refunded at any time. You can change the selections. You can change your mind entirely. It's completely refundable back to you. Irrevocable trusts, however, are part of a Medicaid requirement that must be satisfied as going through the Medicaid process. Those are not freely canceled, readily canceled. The money can only be taken out upon producing a death certificate by a funeral home. So it's something that you're doing as part of a spend down. And it's something that, again, Medicaid is a government subsidy. It's state subsidy of your health care. They want to know that these final arrangements are made and they will not be charged with that expense over and above. So that's part of the reason why they make you go to a funeral home and do this. As Donna mentioned, the irrevocable cap has gone from $5,400 to $8,000 within the past 2 years. I'd say it's very recent. They are allowing you to go back, if you had made one of those $5,400 burial agreements, they are allowing you to go back and put more into the trust to bridge that gap between the $5,400 and the $8,000. You don't have to, but it's an option available to you. And basically pre-planning, regardless if it's for Medicaid or peace of mind, you're going to the funeral home, you're putting down your selections, as if, God forbid, it were happening today. What would you want? You're thinking not just of a funeral home, but a funeral is a much bigger picture than just a funeral home. There is a cemetery or crematory. There are outside costs. There are church services, church fees, outside costs, death certificates, obituaries, flowers, monuments, headstones. Again, there's a lot of details, a lot of specifics here. But pre-planning enables you to come in, make these selections, fund if you wish, or if you are obligated for Medicaid, and the monies are placed in an interest-bearing account. You get regular updates of the interest that has been accrued, and you can call at any time if you have such a question. I will just stress a few things to you. Some of you may have made pre-arrangements already with existing firms, and that's good. It's good that you have been forward-thinking and you've made plans. I encourage you, however, to check your documents. Many families have transferred pre-arrangements to us since we are here but a few years. We're 3 years in Greenwich, but 110 in the industry, I'd like to say. But a lot of families have transferred to us, and what we are noticing, boxes are not checked off. You know, people did this thinking that they were guaranteed a locked-in price, and they are in fact not. We are happy for you to make an appointment. You can meet with one of the Vincents, my father or brother. They will look at these pre-arrangements, they will go over them, and they will make sure that you are protected. Number two, again, arrangements are transferable if you want to come to another facility. We honor all pre-arrangements. We will honor whatever prices were given, and if other funeral homes, if you do transfer, other funeral homes I know do keep an administrative fee. We will honor that and remove that fee from our services because we don't believe anybody should be penalized when choosing to do that. How do you select a funeral home? Like I said, they're not apples and apples, they're often apples and oranges. Reputation is key. Regardless if it's a funeral director, an attorney, or a case manager, you should leave with a feeling of trust and confidence second to none. You should walk out feeling that you made the right decision. Don't stop until you find that. With any of the professionals up in the panel, make sure that your questions are answered, that someone is taking the time to answer every single question that you have. Reputation. Speak to your friends. Find out who they used. Find out their experience. Word of mouth is key for concierge case management, attorneys, funeral homes, with anything in life. Do your homework. And that's what we encourage you to do. I will share a quick story about agent letters and pre-planning, and just to, not as a scare tactic, but it's a very tangible example of what can happen if your wishes aren't communicated. When we first came to town, a few months later, a family wished to transfer a pre-arrangement to us. And they came in with the paperwork, everything was spelled out. A woman was planning for her aunt. The woman in question was estranged from her daughter, and she had a niece that served as her caregiver and really her closest living relative. She had siblings, but the niece really took charge. The woman planned a wake. She planned a mass at her longtime church that she attended weekly Sunday mass at. She indicated the dress that she wanted to wear. She let her niece know where the family plot was, and the niece, in good faith and due diligence, carried these out, went to a funeral home, and set these arrangements. The funeral director neglected to ask if there were other living family members in closer legal relationship than a niece. Because although they were very close, and she was much closer to the niece than the daughter, legally we are bound by a legal hierarchy of next of kin, unless otherwise directed in an agent letter. They never advised this woman about an agent letter. The aunt passes away, they contact Cox and Graziano, and unfortunately, we are bound by the daughter who surfaced at the time and wanted her mother cremated with no services. The wake, the mass, everything that this woman took the time to put on paper was negated because although she took steps to pre-plan, there was that one more step that was missing. It would have been much, it was heartbreaking from our end, not having known her, and I'm an attorney myself. Believe me, if there was a loophole, we would have liked to find it, but there were none. So, if you have done planning, go that extra step to make sure, number one, that the plans are in place, that they're valid, that the I's are dotted, that the T's are crossed. Two, make sure these plans are communicated to everyone. It's one thing to have a plan, and that's great, but if the people that you want to carry it out aren't aware, then really what good is it? So go the extra step. Keep your documents in a central place. Communicate where that place is. And not just documents that are legally related and healthcare related, but again, if you're a veteran, where are your discharge papers? How will your family know so that you can have proper military honors? So all important papers, everything, keep it in a central place, let people know where they are. But also, if you have made these plans, check them to make sure they're okay. Because having the plan is great, but making sure the plan can be carried out is even better. So in closing, I think the three of us gave you much food for thought this evening. I do thank you for having the courage to come here and engage in conversations that really matter.